Hello and welcome to this week's IG Live. We have a great interview lined up for you today with Richard Ho. He is a Chinese Jewish author, and we have some of his books on display behind me. Some of them, there are too many for me to even fit in on the display, so I've got some of them here for you. But we're going to be talking about some of his latest books. And also, before we get started, I wanted to mention, if you haven't signed up for this year's virtual party, please go ahead and do so. It's going to be so fun. It's always really great. It's on Zoom this year on January 30th. You can see the poster behind me. So be sure to go to the link in our bio and you can sign up for that. And thanks to everybody for the end of January. And that your support means that we get to keep on doing great interviews like this and promoting wonderful, diverse authors and illustrators. So thank you for that. Hi.
Hello.
Good to see you. Thanks for joining us
Good
today.
to see you, Leanna. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, why don't we go ahead and get started, and you could maybe introduce yourself and then tell us what was your journey to becoming an author?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Richard, and my journey to becoming an author started when our oldest was about to be born. He just turned 11, so this is quite a while ago. We were starting to build his library, his baby library, and we're getting a lot of books. And at the time, I had not really thought about the idea of writing children's books before. I had always had creative writing aspirations. I wanted to be a screenwriter and a novelist. And it wasn't until I started looking at children's books again as an adult for the first time that I really fell back in love with that format of storytelling. And at the time, I was working at an educational company where a lot of creative people as coworkers. So one of my coworkers was actually a children's book illustrator. And at the time, we had a pet hedgehog. So my wife and I like strange animals, and we had a pet hedgehog. And I was showing pictures of our hedgehog, Henry, to coworkers, and this coworker, who's a children's book illustrator, said, "Hey, you should write a book about Henry." And I had never thought about that before, but that sort of planted the seed in my head of, hey, maybe this is something that I can try to explore as far as a new form of storytelling that I'd never really looked at before. So once we started building this library, I really just was amazed by how much depth and just amazing potential within like this format of storytelling, specifically picture books, because that's what we were focusing on at the time. And so I really wanted to get into it, and I started looking at like different ways to learn the format and to master the craft of writing picture books. And as a lot of people who have tried this before will tell you, it's so much harder than it looks. A picture book is deceptively short and simple, but within those 36 to 40 pages, whatever it is, you have to pack a lot as far as story structure and characters and development and things like that. So basically all the challenges that a novelist or any other longer form author has to deal with, you also have to deal with as a picture book author. And I think that was the first realization that I had, that this is not going to be an easy road. So once I started doing the research, I just read as much as I could, reading as many picture books as I could get my hands on. Luckily, we had access to a lot because of libraries and bookstores, and also just the interest of building this library for our sons. So it took a number of years of just sort of like breaking my teeth on the difficulty of writing a picture book manuscript. But eventually I got to the point where I was confident enough that I could send it out to agents and go through the whole query process. And so that's how I ultimately landed my agent and started selling these stories. So that's how it started.
And I'm trying to remember, because you've published a lot of books. I'm kind of running through the list in my mind. Did you publish the book about the hedgehog?
No, so the Hedgehog story has never been published. It's in a drawer somewhere. Basically, it's gone through double-digit revisions. I've never been able to crack that story. And I think most people will tell you that the first story they write is generally awful, just because you don't know what you're doing. And over the years, I've tried to go back to it, and like it has a special place in my heart. But I've never been able to get Henry into decent enough shape to actually sell a story. So one day maybe, but I've sort of moved on from Henry at this point. But I will always be grateful to Henry for his role in getting me on this path.
Right. Yes, he served his purpose,
That's right.
I guess.
Yes.
And we all owe something to your colleague who suggested
Absolutely.
that you write that story, so that now
For
we
sure.
have all these wonderful books. But I am curious. You talk about writing about a hedgehog, because you've written about so many different topics. That was one thing that struck me when I was getting ready for this interview about a basketball player, a Mars rover, holiday celebrations, a lost package, a walk around the neighborhood, and soon I think you have a nonfiction book coming out about a rock.
Yeah.
So when you're looking for a good story, what do you look for in a good story idea? Is there kind of a thread that connects all of your different stories?
Yeah, I think the one thing I wanted to, for myself, I wanted to be one of those picture book authors that wrote very widely as far as subject. Like I didn't want to get pigeonholed into like a specific type of story. And I think that the one common thread about all of the stories that I've done so far is there's an element of like the wow factor. You know, for as a kid, what makes the kids say wow? You know, when they hear something like an interesting fact, or when they see an event or whatever it is, like as long as it makes them say wow, like that's the kernel of a story. And I think that's the almost all of the stories that I've ever written have started with that sort of like, what's the wow moment? And so the first story, and one of the things is like, you write so many manuscripts and you have no control over like which ones get sold and when. So like the one that happened to get sold first was the Mars rover one. So Curiosity rover. So that one was just like growing up, like really like a huge fan of space and all things space. Yeah, there it is, Red Rover. So I've always been a bit of a space nerd growing up, and so I wanted to. The idea there was that thinking about this rover completely alone on like an alien planet, and how like the existential loneliness there really struck me as something that could be very isolating, but also very exciting. And like, you know, as an explorer, like to go out there and just rove around this landscape. So that really just struck me as something that there could be something there to do a story about that. So that's how that got off the ground. And then the Lost Package was really a tribute to my dad, who is a veteran of the U.S.
Right.
Postal Service, yeah, for many years. And so I grew up around mail and packages and things like that. So I had always just thought like, what would happen to a package that gets lost, like it within the whole like extremely complex mail system. And the reality is most of them just get lost and nothing happens with them. But like I always thought that like a more hopeful view would be to track one package that gets lost, but then is picked up along the way and eventually makes its way back to where it was supposed to go. So those were like the sort of things that like they start off as just sort of like a kernel of an idea, and then they just bloom if you give them a chance. Not every idea is gonna end up becoming a book. You know, some of them are just not full enough. But I think the ones that do stick are the ones that have that potential to be something that kids can really relate to or resonate with.
Oh, and you've got a nice comment here saying, I agree, becoming a children's book author and seeing where you make the wow factor. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. And so just to focus on one of your books, the two New Years, you know, of course we have Lunar New Year coming up, so I wanted to talk about that. And it's a great story that I don't think I've ever seen covered before, which is a family that celebrates Lunar New Year and Rosh Hashanah. And so it won the Sidney Taylor Book Award and the National Jewish Book Award. So congratulations for that.
Thank you so much.
And you've noted that the family in the book is not that uncommon these days. So why is it important that we see more of these diverse and mixed families in children's
Yeah.
books?
I think, you know, growing up for me, the challenge was as an Asian American, like I didn't see a lot of stories that had Asian representation.
Mhm.
And so like, and I think a lot of people can relate to whatever background they're from, if it's a more marginalized or minority background. Generally speaking, you know, children's literature specifically, but also literature in general across the board, even for adults, has never been as representative as it should be as far as reflecting the readership. But now that I have a family that's multicultural, you know, like that's a completely different thing where also there's a dearth of representation for families that have multiple backgrounds within them. So I think for me, watching my kids grow up with these two cultures that are blending so seamlessly, you know, I chose to convert to Judaism as an adult, so I didn't really have that experience growing up of having multiple backgrounds, other than like being Chinese growing up in America. I think that comes with a little bit of sort of multiculturalism because you're immersed within American culture while also bringing your own like Chinese culture with you. But to have like Asian and Chinese elements interacting so beautifully within my own family, it just struck me that like this is something that everybody needs, no matter what background you're from. And there are so many families today that are not just one or two, possibly even three or more, different types of cultural backgrounds. And like, to me, that was just such an untapped area within children's books, to show kids that this is not as unusual or rare as you might think. And to have kids feel seen in that way. And like, that's the thing that's been so gratifying for me, is not just, I mean, there have been surprisingly more Chinese Jewish families coming up to me and saying like they feel seen than you would expect. Like, that to me, like, I knew they were out there, but I didn't realize how many families were like that are like mine. And that's incredibly gratifying. But also just any family that has any mix, regardless if it's Chinese or Jewish or not, like, that to me is the best, because like, this book isn't just limited to an audience of a very specific Venn diagram of Jewish and Chinese. It's anybody that has a mix of backgrounds can relate to this idea that, all the different like customs and celebrations, as different as they are, they're really based on the same themes of family and prosperity and things like that. So like, that to me was just something that really was crying out for some sort of picture book treatment to tap into that.
And you've got several comments saying how much they love the book, how great to have this representation. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about what you were just saying, because that was something that really struck me about the book, is that I think it brings out so beautifully the fact that even though some of the traditions are different, there are also so much that is similar about them, either the ways that they do it, but like you said, the ideals that they represent, like family, community, hope, renewal, and that those are really universal themes. So what do you hope that young readers take away from reading the book?
Yeah, I think just the idea that because they're growing up in a world that's very diverse, and there's a lot of different people, and hopefully they're growing up with exposure to people that are not like them. And I think just this empathy of knowing that like, this person might be doing things very differently than I do it in my family, but at the core, they're coming from the same place. And ultimately, we're all human, and we all have the same things that drive us and the same things that delight us and scare us. And I think those are the moments as a child when you're reading a book and you're seeing you're self-reflected, even if it doesn't look exactly like you. I think that's such a powerful thing, because then you realize that everybody that you're seeing out there in the world is very similar to you. And that's like a warm and unifying feeling, to know that kids are going into this world that looks very different, and will continue to look very different, as they're growing up. But like, equipping them with this idea that you don't have to look at the differences in people. You can don't zero in on what's making you different. Zero in on the things that are commonalities. And I think that is just such a powerful thing that we can equip the next generation with as they're navigating all the challenges of the future.
Which is something I think you'll also explore in another new book of yours, which is Taste of Home, which
Right.
just came out in 2024. And again, it's talking about these diverse cultures and how having the diversity can really enrich our lives. This is about Lower East Side, which of course is very diverse. And tell us about the journey the main character takes in this book and how his concept of home evolves.
Yeah. So this is very close to my heart, because like, I grew up in the suburbs of New York City. And so I went to Chinatown quite often as a kid with my sister and my parents. And so I'm very familiar with that area. But I always knew, sort of in the back of my mind, that there was like a strong Jewish presence there as well. And this is well before I converted to Judaism or had any inkling that I would do that. So like, to me, this synthesis of like two different aspects of my childhood, like as an adult, was just sort of a natural thing where like, I know that area is very diverse. There's different pockets of like, immigrant neighborhoods there. How amazing would it be for a story to highlight, like, not just one child, but like that child and his friends, from diverse backgrounds, walking around and exploring each other's cultures and foods. And food is such a universal thing, when it comes to it. Not only is it each culture having its unique tastes, but the ability to share those across cultures and with people outside of your culture, I think, is such a powerful way to unite people. So I just really love the idea that like, within walking distance, like, of everything, like, you can find all of these different tastes. So choosing to center the story on the one kid at the beginning, because like the Jewish neighborhood it's so historic, and there's so much there that I came to learn and become familiar with as I was going through my conversion journey. I actually met my wife for our first date in the Lower East Side, so like an aside, that it was just sort of like a special place for me. So I wanted to take that angle and have the kids sort of just going to like meet up in different corners of the Lower East Side and then walk around. And I remember the day before the book came out, last summer, I did a walking tour to sort of recreate the different areas that are depicted by Sibu T.P, the illustrator. Amazing job.
Yeah.
He's also a native New Yorker, so like he was able to go around to these places and take photo reference. And so that was just such an amazing thing to be able to bring like the story down to the reality and sort of recreate all that experience of walking around and seeing all of these different sites and the different tastes as well.
I love that because I think that on the one hand, that seems like such an abstract concept to talk to kids about. But like you said, like the food, everybody can relate to that. And taking this walking tour is such a concrete way to kind of show them what could be like a really abstract idea. But one thing that really struck me about both of these books, The Two New Years and A Taste of Home, is that they really focus on the joy. And, and a lot of times when we talk about interaction of different cultures, there's a place for talking about like some of the difficulties, historically, and the struggle and trauma that have come from that. And yet you've also written something that's really joyful, because there can be such joy with these interactions. So why was that important to you to really focus on the joy that can come from that?
Yeah, I think especially with children's books, you want to make sure that kids are getting experience that is hopeful and happy and full of joy, because you want them to have their life infused with that. There's going to be enough challenge for them growing up to deal with, like the various challenges of life and realities of the world out there, that there's still a way, not to insulate them in a bubble, but to at least give them this idealized outlook that despite the challenges that they're going to face, there is still joy and optimism and hope in everything that they do. And I think it's important to instill that early, to especially when it comes to like, as I'm writing Jewish stories, and there's so much about Jewish books that in the past has been focused on the trauma of like what it means to be Jewish, and there's a lot, like so many books about the Holocaust, and like today there's so much of this like anti-Semitism that is being presented again in a way that kids can't ignore it, they can't hide from it. But at the same time, like I think it's important because of that to highlight the joy within Jewish stories, and the fact that Judaism is not defined by the trauma, it's not defined by the all the challenges that the Jewish people have gone through over the course of history. I think it's precisely the joy and the optimism and the hope that the people have been able to hold on to over the course of millennia that makes the idea of like presenting and sharing Jewish stories so powerful. So I think, and it's not just exclusive to Judaism, I think there's so much about various cultures around the world that you can easily highlight the difficulties of being a minority, the difficulties of being marginalized or even discriminated against. But within all of that, there needs to be this idea that hope is going to eventually overpower all of that. And I think that we can start with giving kids books that celebrate the joy and the hope.
And speaking of joy and hope and inspiration, I do want to make sure we talk about your other book, which is a little bit different, but still kind of focuses on the themes we talked about representation, and that's If Lynn Can, and which is all about Jeremy Lin, and his success in basketball and how that inspired so many kids, or some of us that aren't kids. So why is this representation, whether we're talking about sports, whether we're talking about books, why is that so significant for young people?
Yeah, I think especially with something like with Jeremy Lin, coming from the background of an Asian American kid in the New York suburbs, there's a lot of the stereotypes that we deal with are like, you're not athletic enough. You're not like, there are certain things that people believe about certain cultures that get ingrained in kids as they're growing up. And so for me, like being a pretty scrawny Asian kid growing up, like I never had any ambitions to be like a superstar, like basketball player, but seeing somebody like Jeremy Lin succeed on that level is eye-opening in so many ways. And I think for me, because he did that while I was already an adult. Like I had to imagine what it would have been like as a kid, an Asian kid, to see that and how transformative that would have been, to me if I had seen that as a kid growing up. So that's really where that book came from, and that's why it's not written in a standard biography format. It's not about like the specific details of his life, really. I mean, we have that as the background, but really the foreground of the story is these three unnamed Asian kids who are growing up in a time where, like, they're dealing with these sort of insecurities and doubts about their own abilities, and they see this guy who looks like them doing these things that nobody ever imagined before, and like, wow, that's so powerful. And I really wanted the story to hinge on that, not so much about the details of his life, but more about the impact on kids who are seeing that anything is possible. That you don't have to be bound by what the world thinks of you. And I think that's such an important lesson for kids to learn, is that they can really do whatever they want. And you can say that, but like when you show them an example of somebody who looks like them doing it, it's so much more impactful.
Yeah, and one of the things I loved about it is you made it about so much more than just basketball, because the kids in the book, they're not necessarily looking to become athletes.
Right.
They're looking to do different things, but all of them are things that people have either told them or made them feel like they couldn't do, like running for student council, I think, and, just different things. It's not just about, some one specific track.
Absolutely.
And talking about, inspiring kids, I know this is kind of a difficult environment or political environment for a lot of people right now. And in a recent Instagram post, you said that now more than ever, we need to work for a better future by preparing children to be better caretakers of this fractured world, which was such a beautiful way to put it. So what role do you think books like yours can play in this process? Why are children's books so important?
Yeah, I think, and I touched a little bit on this before, but there is an idea, and I think this is like an old-fashioned idea, that like when kids are reading books, you want to make it an idealized sort of version of the world that they can escape into, because the real world is so scary and so broken. And I don't really think that's the way to go, because I think there's no getting around the fact that there are things that are problematic in the world today, and we don't want the stories that the kids are going to be exposed to. We don't want them to be deceiving them in a way by saying like things are actually great, like there's nothing to worry about. We want to highlight the joy, as we said, and we want to make sure that they are growing up with a sense of hope. But at the same time, it's okay within children's books to show them the problems, and then like to show them kids actively working to solve the problems. I think that's really where these books can come in and be a lesson for kids to know that, yeah, things aren't perfect right now, but like we can definitely work towards a better world. And I think that's all we can do as adults, as we're trying to raise these kids in a world that is not 100% ideal. I think we need to make sure that they don't lose the hope, but also show them like ways and examples of kids taking an active role in making the world better. And I think that's really the hope for us in our generation as we're creating these stories and hopefully preparing the next generation to be able to fix a lot of the things that are wrong right now, that we might not have the ability within our lifetimes to completely fix everything, but at least we can arm them with the tools to better address it in the future.
Well, and thank you for all the work that you do and giving us tools like these wonderful books. And you can tell from the comments that we've been getting like how much people appreciate your work. So thank you for that. Before I let you go, could you maybe tell us a little bit about your upcoming projects and books that are going to be coming out?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you to everybody for the beautiful comments. I haven't been able to read them, but I'm so appreciative of all the love and the support. It really means everything to me. So the book's coming out next. I've got A Rock is Born, which is coming out this July, and that's, as you said, it's a nonfiction book about the journey of one specific rock through time, and that's a fun one because that wasn't even my idea to begin with. That was my editor, Emily Feinberg at Roaring Brook. Had this idea of doing a story about like following a rock throughout history. And so this is what we came up with together. And it was such a joy to do because, There is something about taking someone else's idea and sort of exploring the ways that that can be fleshed out, and also collaborating with Lily Williams, who's the illustrator, who is a fantastic illustrator and also author herself, who's done a lot of nonfiction and science books. That was just incredible because it was to get multiple perspectives and to be able to bring this story to life, which is, on the surface, it's about a rock. It doesn't seem like it could be all that dramatic, but it actually is. And I'm looking forward to people reading that and seeing it. And then next year, there's a number of books that I think are on the schedule, but like the way these things work is I don't know exactly when they're going to be coming out. But the next picture book after that should be You Can Move Mountains, which is a biography of Bob Ross. And so I grew up watching Bob Ross on PBS, and I still love watching Bob Ross. It's such a soothing experience to watch him paint. So I'm very excited about that one, and that should be coming out, I believe, next year, 2026. And then there's a number of other books that are coming out. One of the recent ones that just got announced is Tove is Good, which is it's going to be a reunion of me and Lynn Scurfield, the illustrator for Two New Years, and I'm very excited about that. And that's a little bit further away, but yeah, these are all projects that I'm so excited for people to see, and they touch on a lot of the things that we've talked about over the past 30 minutes. So I'm just really grateful to be able to have this opportunity to make stories.
Well, and you've gotten several other comments saying, so proud of you. Congratulations on your wonderful book. So thank you again for taking the time to talk with us. And when we see your announcements for any other books, we'll be sure to share that in our stories. And for anybody who's joined us late, or I know one person said they were having trouble with their phone coming in and out of the interview, it's all going to be up on Instagram in a few minutes, and later we'll have it up on our YouTube channel. And let's see, Tove is good for a rock song for sure. Yes, call me for the song. Thanks to Annie. She's a really wonderful support of ours and has been for a long time. So thanks to everybody for watching, and we will see you again soon. And make sure that you do sign up for our virtual party coming up at the end of the month. It's going to be wonderful, and it helps us continue to support such wonderful, diverse book creators. So thanks all, and thanks to everybody for joining us today.
Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Liana.
Bye.